Hey everybody, this is Robb Ryerse and Mike Papacoda, and we are the Bowtie Sales Guys with you again today to be your help, your encouragement, your coach, and your friend in the sales process. We're bringing our more than 30 plus years of experience in sales to talk to you about things that we've learned, things that have worked, things that haven't worked, and hopefully be an encouragement to you and a help. And so we're happy to be with you today, whether you're watching live on Facebook or on YouTube, or if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Google Play. We're happy to have you on board. Mike, how are you doing today?
Man, I'm good, Rob. It's kind of a crazy in the beginning of the week with this Arkansas weather, right? Those storms that blew through, especially here in Fort Smith. So I'm glad it's sunny today. No clouds, just nice and calm. But whew, what a way to start the week.
Absolutely.
I was in the closet when the tornado sirens were going off. So.
Whew. It's a lot for you moving from, trying to dodge the weather to riding Dogecoin to the moon, right?
Right. I mean, listen, in between.
Yep. And this is not a Dogecoin podcast, but maybe it should be.
Listen, you never know. Well, let's see how it goes this week.
Yeah, exactly. As Dogecoin keeps going the way it's going, you might not need to do this podcast anymore.
Oh, I would still do this podcast, Rob. I really enjoy it. So I'll only do the things I really enjoy if it keeps going the way it's going.
Well, that's good to hear. Well, listen, today we are going to talk about a big idea, like we always do, and try to dive into something that hopefully will be helpful to all the salespeople that are out there. We're also going to share a tip that you can put into practice today, and that will be coming at the end. But our big idea today, Mike, is to talk about how critical it is for a salesperson to understand their own sales process. Sales is not an instantaneous kind of thing normally. Normally, there's some kind of process that you've got to go through. That as a salesperson, you are dependent upon your customer to walk a certain steps that ultimately lead to them plopping down their credit card or signing the contract or giving you that yes that you're after. And it's absolutely critical that salespeople understand what that process is and act accordingly based on where their customer is in the process. Rather than assuming that everybody is at the same point, you've got to be able to understand here's where this customer is and here's what I need to do to move them to the next step. Mike, have you seen the value of understanding the sales process, either maybe in your own experience or in the experience of salespeople that you've managed and led?
Yeah, absolutely, Rob. I mean, personally, as a sales rep, when I was doing it myself, knowing that sales process was key. When you're leading other salespeople and you're coaching them, helping them to understand that sales process is absolutely something that without it, you're going to be lost. I mean, I don't do a lot of projects around the house because I am terrible at following instructions. Step 1, step 2. I want to skip to step 7 and just get this thing done. And when you do that, whatever it is that you're putting together is probably going to be done wrong. And sales is no different. Listen, everybody wants to get to the close. You want to close, you want the customer to pay, you want to have that commission check. But there is a process that you have to go through before you get there. And I like what you said at the beginning, Rob. It's going to be different for everyone. Everybody's sales process is going to be a little bit different, but diagnosing and understanding what your sales process is going to take you a long way in your success as a sales professional.
Yeah. I think we like to throw around the phrase from the movie "always be closing," and there's kind of that sense of like, well, I need to always be pushing for the sale. And I think, certainly there's some value in that, but one of the dangers in that is pushing people to that close point, that decision point before they're ready to be there. And maybe Absolutely. if we think of closing as a series of processes that in the close there's a number of steps that maybe the close that you need to make is them setting the meeting with you. And if you're like always be closing is being able to move them to the next step in the process that ultimately leads to them signing the contract or making the purchase. But if you're always closing, if you're always pushing them to, plop down their credit card, you can turn some people off and you're going to miss out on some things. So, I want to caution everybody that like in that always be closing mentality to understand that there's different types of closes along the way.
Yeah. I think maybe always be testing or always be checking in would be better than always be closing. Because ultimately you do want to close, but you need to be checking back with your customer because like you said, you can ask for the sale anytime you want, but if the customer hasn't bought in, they don't see the value, you're going to push them away because nobody likes a pushy salesman.
That's right.
Right. And so you got to be very careful.
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of factors that come into understanding our sales process. And we're going to walk through kind of maybe a pretty generic sales process here in a minute. But before we do that, let's just kind of keep in mind a couple of things that are gonna impact what your sales process looks like. One of those things that you need to think about and keep in mind is timing. The timing of how long it takes somebody to move through the sales process is really going to depend on what industry that you're in. If you are in retail sales trying to, sell, a refrigerator on the floor of a big box store, that process is going to be a little bit different than if you are selling a large technology solution to a big company. The process is going to be different. The timing is going to be different. That couple that is come into your store and is looking at the refrigerators, they're ready to buy. And how you move through that process is going to be much different than if you are, contacting the head of IT for a company, getting a meeting with them. Then, eventually you're going to probably have to meet the CFO to talk about finances. The CEO is going to need to be involved. There's going to be a whole bunch of different moving parts that are going to affect the process. And understanding like those differences is really critical.
Yeah, I think it's more of the timing because I think the process of selling a refrigerator isn't that different than selling to an IT company. It's just going to take a lot longer, right? Because you still need to, build that rapport with that customer, find out what their budget is, what do they want in a refrigerator, why are they looking for a new refrigerator, how big is the space that they're going to put it in. So I think the process, maybe while not exactly the same, there still are those steps that you have to go through. They just happen in a much more condensed time frame than maybe an IT solution or something along those lines.
Yeah, excellent point. So let's talk about maybe, I think, some of the big categories that are a part of the sales process. I think you begin with, and I'm going to kind of lay out 5 steps here. The first 2 might blend together a bit. They all blend together a bit, really, as you move through them. The first 2 for some folks might be overlap, but I like to think of them as separate things. The first step is prospecting, and this is really kind of pre-sale. This is before you even know the person. This is figuring out like, okay, if I've got to go out and find customers, how am I going to do that? If I'm an outside salesperson, or if I have the responsibility of actually building the funnel myself, how am I going to prospect? How am I going to find people? And that is understanding who that kind of sales persona, that avatar of here's what an ideal customer looks like. Here's the people or the companies that use the services or products that I have to offer, and then the lookalike companies or people that match that. Here's this big idea that I've got. Who would this be ideal for? But prospecting is where you begin to build that funnel yourself. Now, if you are in a retail situation, It's the people that are walking in the door that are the prospects. And again, this is happening very quickly. You might not have to do it, but for many salespeople, it begins with figuring out, okay, who are my potential customers and prospecting that way.
Yeah, and I like what you said about, the mirroring, finding those customers that you've already had success with, because those are the type of people that have shown a proclivity for your type of product. And so those are the one that you want to go after. Some people call it low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of different terms for it, but that's where you want to spend that time to get yourself ramped up quickly. Now, once you've gone through that group of people, then you can start to expand out a little bit into maybe areas that you hadn't thought of before, or maybe aren't traditional customers, but you could make a business case for why it would be a good fit for them. But yeah, that first step is that prospecting and learning how to use that time wisely, because that's going to be the key. In the end of the day, you could spend a lot of time prospecting on the wrong customer and have nothing to show for it.
Absolutely. So. And we could probably do a whole bunch of episodes about prospecting. It is one of my favorite parts of, as you know, Mike, I love nothing more than trying to dream of potential customers and coming up with them.
Absolutely.
It's so much fun. So once you've got that set of, okay, here's these potential customers, the next step in the sales process, and for some people this might be the first step in the sales process, depending on what they're, what you're selling and all of that, but it becomes that relationship building, building rapport, as you mentioned before. Kind of doing something to make some contact that gives you the opportunity to have a conversation that might eventually lead to sales. I'm not a huge fan of the gimmicky rapport building stuff. I'm not
look what's on their desk, look at the picture.
Yes. Yeah.
I was sitting here thinking how much I hate that.
I know. I will probably really the only time that I'm going to be commenting on somebody's, what's in their office. I know this has happened a couple of times for me. I've walked into somebody's office and they have got Pittsburgh Steeler, regalia in their office. And I'm a Cleveland Browns fan. And I hate the Pittsburgh Steelers with a profound passion. And so I'm probably going to comment on that. That's happened a couple of times. But if I see a picture of a guy holding a fish, I'm not going to all of a sudden pretend that I can talk, fly fishing with him. I think that rapport building, that relationship building comes from demonstrating some credibility, some authority. It might happen through a phone call. It might happen through an email. It might happen through walking in the door. But you show, hey, here's someone that is not going to waste my time. Here's somebody that's got something that might be of interest to me. Here's someone but the way they carry themselves, the way they talk, somebody that I might be interested in having a further conversation with.
Yeah, I mean, I like how you brought up the Pittsburgh Steelers thing, because you are genuinely passionate about the Browns and that rivalry. And so it makes sense to connect on that level. But like you said, you don't fish. You don't like to fish. So I'm not going to try and talk about fishing or golfing or his kids. I haven't earned the right to talk to him about his kids yet. I think it just needs to be something that's genuine. And if you've talked to them on the phone before, maybe there was something they said, maybe you saw something on their Facebook page that you could relate to, that you saw that, hey, this guy is big into, for me, it's theater. I love theater. I love being a part of it. And if I saw that a client was also into that, I would find a way to work that into the conversation. But yeah, that whole go in and look around the office and see if you can find something to connect on, it's just cheesy to me. I mean, listen, maybe it works. Some people may love it, but for me, that doesn't feel genuine to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I can't tell you how many times I have walked into a store and had a salesperson approach me and, begin to chit chat about weird stuff, trying to build rapport. And I'm just like, no, let's get to it. And I think one of the best ways to build a relationship and to build rapport is by showing some sense of professionalism, showing some sense of, hey, I understand that you're busy. I understand that I'm interrupting you. I understand that I'm asking for something valuable, which is your time and attention. And I'm not going to waste that by talking about the weather necessarily.
Yeah, you need to identify what type of personality they have. You need to understand that me, and I've told this when I was managing salespeople, like when you come to me, I need you to give it to me quick. I need bullets. We're not going to talk about the weather. Don't care how we'll get to that eventually. But at first, get right to it.
Yeah.
And that is my personality style. And if a salesperson does that with me, we're going to build a better connection then. Now, look, there are some people that have 1,000 questions and they want to spend the time to get to know you and build that trust. That's not me. That's not my style. But as the sales professional, you need to recognize the type of personality that you're dealing with and adjust accordingly.
Yeah. Yep. I think you go in assuming that your interruption is going to bother them, or is going to be an interruption, and you can always back off from that and relax, as opposed to, like, if you go in just hey, shooting the breeze, you can't recover from that if that's not how they want to respond and react, right? If that's not if that's not you can always relax and relate on that kind of more casual basis. You can't go from casual to professional, casual to more formal, if you've already approached it that way,
If you come in casual and you're just like flipping about while you're there, you've already lost that person, because now all of a sudden, like, oh, and by the way, I'm also here to talk about this product. I mean, go in, tell them why you're there.
Yeah.
You could be friendly about it and you can let them know. But if you're just like, oh yeah, the weather's great. I love that blouse. I love that shirt. Bow tie's great. What? Why are you here? Why are you bothering me? That's really what you're gonna get.
Yeah. So you've got to first. So you've got your prospects. Then you've got to build some relationship, build some rapport, and that immediately. And we've talked about like how important it is to know kind of the people knowledge, the people side of things, having those people skills. It's absolutely critical at that step. Then you move into the discovery process. And the discovery stage is when you are asking questions, when you're figuring out what their needs are, when you are finding out, how big the space is in, that refrigerator would need to fit into. Do they care about, having an ice maker or a water maker in the door? Like finding out those kinds of things where you're asking the questions and uncovering what their needs are. Long before you begin pitching them something, figuring out, hey, here's what their needs are. And as we've talked about, so you can connect those dots, you've got to understand, here's where my customer's coming from.
Yeah. I mean, you need to know where they are, where they want to be, and how you build that bridge over that gap of those two places. And the only way to build that gap and to build a bridge that's going to support that sales process is to ask questions and to listen and to dig and ask why and really seek to understand what it is they want to get out of this purchase.
Yeah. Now, your process, depending on what industry you're in, what kind of sales you're doing, might be different. It might be, a casual conversation standing on the showroom floor. It might be a formal meeting. It might take the form of an email. If you're selling online, it might be having them fill out a survey of some kind. But it's that discovery stage might look different and might take, a different amounts of time depending on your industry and what type of salesperson you are. But you cannot skip that stage no matter what. Because how do you know what you're going to sell them? And how do you know what's going to make a difference for them if you don't spend the time asking the questions and doing the kind of discovery that you need to do?
I agree. And discovery is super important. Now, you may have some buyers that come in and know exactly what they want. Don't pester them with discovery questions. Give them what they want. Now, you may see a gap or a flaw in what they're buying based on what they want to do. And so maybe you want to ask a couple of questions just to make sure that what they're purchasing is right for them. Because they may have come in with this is what I want. This is how I want to do it. And after one or two questions, you might go, well, real quick, let me just show you this or that, because it sounds like this might be a better fit. And sometimes it is, but don't talk yourself out of the sale. That's for sure.
Yeah. I think we have all done that at times. You can absolutely talk yourself out of the sale. That would be a good topic sometime for us to talk about. So we've prospected, We've built some rapport. We've built some relationship. We've asked the questions. Now it's time to advocate. Now's the time where you're making your pitch. You are suggesting to them, here's what your need is. Here's what your pain is. Here's the gap that you have. Here's how we can meet that need. You're connecting the dots. Here's the solution that will meet the need that you have. And I'm reminded again, it's a cliche, but it's like that. Somebody comes into a store to buy a drill. They don't really want a drill. They want a hole. Like that's, and it's keeping in mind, what is it that they actually need? What is it that they're after? And how can I then advocate for that? And advocating is, if you have asked the right questions and figured out exactly what their needs are, if you understand what their timeline is, what their budget is, that advocating can be very assumptive. It can be like, hey, here's the solution. How do we want to move forward? Knowing it's not like a fingers crossed, like, man, I'm going to throw a Hail Mary and hope this works. It's I know exactly what this customer's all about. I know exactly what their needs are. Here's the solution that's going to make sense for them. And I'm going to advocate for that. And I'm going to take that assumptive approach.
Yeah, I think that's a great approach, Rob, because again, we've identified the problem through the discovery process. So we know what the problem is, but even deeper than that, we understand the impact of that problem on their business, whether it's costing them revenue, they're having to pay overtime, or they're having to cut staff, whatever that particular problem is, and the impact. And then when you come in with that solution, like you said, you're advocating to say, listen, we identified the problem together. You told me the impact was this. And based on what you've told me, if we implement this or you purchase that, it is going to alleviate that problem, save you this, save you that. So when you get to the closing, like you said, it shouldn't be a Hail Mary. It should be a very well thought out, here's how this solution is going to solve the problem and impact your business moving forward.
Yeah. And when you get to that advocating stage, you might find out that there are some objections that you had not yet uncovered. And you might find out what the real objections are at that point. And so that advocating it's not just a one-time thing. It can be a process as well, where you are having to kind of circle back and make sure all the questions are answered, make sure all the objections are overcome, make sure all the right people are on the same page, but continuing to assume that if you've done everything right, like this solution's gonna make sense for them.
Yep, absolutely.
Once you've then advocated and you get that yes, then the final step in the sales process is support. And I know that there's some salespeople that would love to just hand this off to somebody else, but I think it's absolutely critical that salespeople stay involved in making sure that their customers are getting the support that they needed. Now, it might be in the that support might take all sorts of different forms. It might be, with the refrigerator salesperson, it's, the salesperson's out there making sure that it gets loaded into the truck correctly. And, or double checking to make sure it gets delivered on time and giving the customer a call and saying, hey, I just want to make sure that everything got delivered correctly. Are you happy with things? Taking that extra step of support goes a long way to building the kind of relationships that are going to turn into repeat customers and customers that are going to advocate for you and word of mouth going to say, hey, if you need a fridge, here's the person to go to.
Yeah, I think support is such a key word, and one of the things that you do really well is you actually take the time to appreciate that the customer has chosen to do business with you. And maybe we talked about it on the very first podcast about your bow tie cards, your customized cards with a bow tie. It took a moment to write that handwritten note and send that out to the customer. And I don't get a lot of handwritten notes from people that I do business with, but I can tell you the ones that I do get, I remember. And those are the type of people that I want to continue to do business with, that I want to follow, that I want to refer to my friends and to my family. And so, yeah, taking those little extra steps, they're not always big things. I mean, they could be little things, but they make the biggest difference.
Yeah. And making sure that everything has gone well. And listen, I'm the type of person, I tend to think that when something goes wrong, it's actually an opportunity to demonstrate that you'll take care of them. I think, we have talked about our whole solar panel drama that has taken place for us. So as a part of our solar panel package that we bought, it included a new HVAC system, and it's like a total thing, and that was something we were interested in anyway, so everything got bundled together. They came and they've installed the new HVAC system. Well, Sunday morning, laying in bed next to my wife, and I hear this dripping noise, and I'm like, "Wait, what is that?" And all of a sudden we realize that right above our heads, right above my wife, it almost like a scene out of Schitt's Creek, there is water dripping from our bedroom ceiling.
Wow.
And the big bubble is forming in the ceiling, and we jump out of bed, and we're like, Moira, like from Schitt's Creek. And we head up, and we realize after a little bit of hunting around that a drainage pipe for condensation had not been attached, or it was attached and wasn't glued, and it got bumped off. So I call the company, get a voicemail. I also text the person that I have texted with in the past and say, hey, we got a major problem. This is Sunday morning. Well, Sunday afternoon, within 10 minutes or so, the emergency tech calls me. I explain, hey, we got to head out to church. We're not going to be home till this afternoon. He said, okay, I'll be there at 2:00. He came at 2:00, fixed it. Got the drainage pipe, and now we're in the process of scheduling a time for some folks to come and fix our bedroom ceiling. And I said to him, listen, stuff happens, because stuff happens. This is not anything morally wrong that they did. It was just a mistake. It happens.
Right. Yep.
How they deal with that mistake goes a long way in how much I'm gonna recommend them to others. And that kind of support, when you get good support after the sale, makes you feel really good about being a repeat customer. And as we know, it's so much easier to get a customer to buy again than it is to get someone to buy the first time.
Oh yeah, and if you don't treat them well, if they did nothing, Rob, the only story you would tell is not the great deal they gave you when they came. It'll be, had this leak and they didn't even call me back. They didn't come out and fix it. Took a week. And that will just compound and spread. It's just, it's not worth it to not offer that support, because it's going to go a long way if you'll do it right.
Yeah. So whatever your industry, whatever you sell, whatever product or service it is, you've got to understand what your sales process is and what your customers are going through and how you can help them move from one stage to the next. As they are moving through that process, as they are taking those steps, how do you help them? How do you usher them from the relationship stage into the discovery stage, into the advocating, and then ultimately in support? And you've got to understand where they're at and how to move them forward. And that kind of leads us to our tip for the day, Mike. And I think it is absolutely important for salespeople every once in a while to take some time to regroup. You get busy. I don't know about everybody else, but you get busy. You got all these different plates spinning. You've got, lists of prospects and customers, and you're filling in your CRM system, and you're trying to hit your budget or your quota, and you're trying to do whatever your sales manager is asking you to do. And there can be a lot of stuff going on, and it's easy to lose track of things. And I know for me, one of the things that's really, really helpful is to set aside a little bit of time to sit down. And I typically don't use my CRM for this because I want to get out of all of the normal stuff that I see. And I'll take a piece of paper or a spreadsheet, and I'll actually put these 5 things that we've talked about into columns: prospects, relating, discovery, advocating, support. And I will sit and list my customers that are in each of those stages. It's just, for me, it's really good to just kind of regroup and say, okay, big picture, who have I got at what stage? And that helps me then to ask the question, what do I need to do to move them to the next step? So I've got these 4 customers that are in the advocating stage, but they haven't said yes yet. What do I need to do to move them, to that close? I've got this customer over here that's got this hanging question, this hanging issue that, I really want them to re-up this next year. So I've got to get that fixed. What do I need to do to support that customer? Yep. These prospects, how do I get into that relating phase with them? How do I move them from the prospect column into this place where we're actually beginning this process? And I like to take some time to sit down and get a big picture sense of that, because you also then get a sense of what you're doing well and what you're not doing well. Because if you've got, 800 prospects and nobody that you're advocating a solution to, nobody that's at that close stage, well, you've got some work to do. And if you've got, a bunch of people at the close and nothing else in your pipeline, then you are a couple of weeks away from, getting called into your sales manager's office to have a conversation about what the future looks like. And I like to just take that time to pull back and to regroup and to get the big picture view of where my customers are in this process.
Yeah, that it makes me think of the analogy I think of is if you've ever watched a basketball game, college, NBA, and the other team is just, they're running up the floor, they're dunking on you, alley-oops. They've got all the momentum. And a properly used timeout by your coach to say, hey, timeout. We need to regroup here. Mm-hmm. We need to talk about what's happening. Why aren't you covering this guy? We're missing this. And just taking that time in that timeout to regroup as a team, to reassign who's going to be doing what, can really change the overall outlook of the entire team. And I've seen it. I'm sure you've seen it, Rob. You've seen it in football, basketball. When the coach uses that timeout properly to help that team regroup and get them back out on the floor, it can make all the difference in whether they're going to get blown out or they're going to start chipping away. And next thing you know, they're only 2 points down and they're tied and now they've got the lead. And so I love the idea as a salesperson of regrouping, just taking a timeout, and you do kind of what the coach did. Here's my 4 buckets. Here's where I need to focus. Here's where I need to spend my time. And then it just gets you back out on the floor and you start to move forward in those processes. So great tip, Rob.
Excellent analogy. And I personally, again, I like to get out of the CRM and kind of do this fresh and see, make sure I remember everybody, because that's key. I like to get to a different place. I don't like to do this at my desk. I like to go to a Starbucks or go to a cigar shop and sit down and actually be in a completely different place, which allows me to think differently. And that gives you the chance to regroup so you know what your game plan is as you head back in.
And don't be afraid to bring somebody in. Rob, you and I have spent many hours together in the cigar shop, at a coffee shop, talking about, hey, what do we need to do? What do we need to regroup? How can we move forward? And, a lot of times we'd come up with I think we talked about this early on, the 4-legged call. Yeah. Let's do this together, man. Let's get that momentum going.
Yeah. Well, listen, thanks for being along. If you've got questions, you've got comments, you've got ideas, find our Facebook page. We're the Bowtie Sales Guys. You can find us on Facebook. Like that page. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review, Spotify, Google Play, all those places. Same thing on YouTube. Give us a little thumbs up on Facebook. Thanks so much for being along today. Mike, any final words of encouragement to the sales folks that are out there?
Always be testing.
Very good. We'll talk to you soon.